Underneath the sink of the hallway bathroom, there's a first aid kit with a needle that I can use to stitch you up, 'cause you're bleeding out, and it's far too deep for a bandage now. I was waking up, oh, it made me shiver. Your voice was weak, slurred and bitter. All the drinking does is thin your blood. It tells your heart that you'll never be alone.
Welcome, everyone, to the Focus Atlanta 2020 launch conference. We're excited for you to all be joining us today. We have quite the lineup indeed. I want to say a thank you to our sponsors, FIS, Jamestown, Peachtree Planning, Clayton County, University of West Georgia, for making today possible. For those who registered for today's forum, we will be sending a link to read this year's Focus Atlanta report complimentary. I also wanted to make note that we will be enabling the Q&A function during the conference. So please feel free to send through your questions, and we will try to get to as many as possible. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We will be getting started in about 3 minutes now. We still see people coming in, but we do have quite the lineup indeed. So I just also wanted to make note that we will be enabling the Q&A function. So please feel free to send through any and all questions, and we will try to get to as many as possible. But until then, we hope you enjoy the event. We will be getting started in just 1 minute here with the Focus Atlanta 2020 official virtual launch conference. Stay tuned.
More than building amazing spaces, we support the people who bring them to life. Now, you can too. We're Jamestown. Welcome to Jamestown Invest. Jamestown Invest offers access to commercial real estate opportunities not typically available to individual investors, until now. Affordable minimums and an online platform that makes every move easy. Connect with real communities. We build spaces that generate excitement. As an investor, you can connect with the success of the people who make our properties community centers and innovation hubs. Real success stories, creating real value. Jamestown properties attract exciting innovators and entrepreneurs. Your investment opens the door to cutting-edge retail, restaurants, businesses, and startups. Be a part of real innovation. We revitalize urban neighborhoods with modern, mixed-use spaces that attract fresh attention and honor historic roots. Consider investing in something you can see and experience. At Jamestown, we build opportunity, community, and innovation. Join us. Join Jamestown Invest.
Just a quick mic check. Do I have a mic check? Great. Welcome. Everyone, today, this is the virtual event for our launch of Focus Atlanta, the third edition of Focus Atlanta. I'm delighted to have you all here virtually speaking with us today. My name is Abby Malone, and I'm the president and CEO of Capital Analytics, the publishers of the Invest and Focus series. Today, we're delighted to launch our economic report in the format of 3 panels, a keynote speaker here today with you. As we look forward to discussing some of the key issues facing Atlanta metro region, I'd like to take a moment and talk about what has led us to this year. 2020, as we know, has been anything but normal as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's not sugarcoat it. This year has been unprecedented in all the wrong ways. COVID has had a devastating impact on businesses and livelihoods in the region and the country. When we look back at this absolutely unexpected year, I'm pretty sure we'll be shaking our heads in disbelief and perhaps in astonishment. No one could have predicted a worldwide pandemic that would not only strangle economies, but do so with such ruthlessness that the world machine would actually grind to a halt. The pandemic has taken a huge toll and continues to do so. But we aren't here today because we're pessimists. We're here because we believe that not only is the future bright, but all the tools are there to make us stronger than ever. And there's a great deal to be positive about in Atlanta, despite this pandemic. It starts with one of the world's busiest airports, the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, that helped drive more than a decade of growth in jobs and population, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. A great talent pipeline fueled by the country's best universities and colleges, a tech hub that is only expanding and gaining in stature, a business-friendly environment that is convincing major corporations to relocate here, a great climate. All these factors and more have come together to make Atlanta one of the top 15 destinations in the country for businesses and careers. There's no doubt that Atlanta has become a key pillar in the Southeast. These factors existed before the pandemic, and they'll be there to support the region in a post-pandemic landscape. What does that mean? It means that while we're experiencing difficult times now, the foundation is already set for greater growth and prosperity in the near future. It's true that we likely won't be out of the woods until a vaccine is in play, but there are positive developments on that front as well. Recently, both Pfizer and Moderna announced that they had made great progress in a potential vaccine. So maybe we're closer to the end of this than we thought. But in the meantime, what do we do? People have a way of persevering and adapting. Rather than sit still and ponder the future, we're here moving to shape that future. Think about the forum today, the launch of this third Focus Atlanta annual report. I believe it is a sign of that. 6 months ago, when we started planning this book, I certainly never expected to be hosting a major business forum with well over 600 registered attendees from the comfort of my laptop. In many ways, it's a new beginning, a beginning that will lead to new opportunities. Here at Capital Analytics, we've certainly felt the impacts of COVID-19 and have now started to emerge on the other side. We could have tucked our head in the collective sand and hoped that this would all go away soon enough. But we didn't. We acted on new opportunities. For example, traditionally speaking, the 200 or so interviews we conduct to produce each and every year's annual economic review are hosted in person. As luck would have it, a platform that was already commonplace in our company, Zoom, was giving the world a tutorial in the early months of 2020. And here we are, months later, hundreds upon hundreds of interviews conducted without skipping a beat. Crisis certainly breeds innovation, and in our case, it meant more meetings and now more markets of coverage as we can start to produce the same quality business reviews and digital newsletters on almost anywhere, from almost anywhere. In the last 6 months, we've hosted 7 virtual events, something that we had never done before and had to learn completely as we went along. but now it is a part of our repertoire, and I believe it is here to stay. In addition, we've expanded our media platform to include Invest Insights video series as well as podcast, with hundreds of interviews from a grassroots and authentic take on business, where you will hear and see some of familiar Atlanta voices and faces. This has all proven to us that economic and business intelligence is now more important than ever. All of us here at Capital Analytics are proud to play this important role in economic recovery. I'm also proud to be speaking to you here today in this new environment, a new platform that represents all the possibilities we have to write our future. This is how it starts, with people deciding that the barrier in front of them is nothing more than something to go over, go around, or plow right through. These are challenging times, but my eye is on the future, and I believe the future is bright and full of opportunities. Today, mindful of the president, we'll be discussing a better future and how we can get there. And we have quite a lineup for you today, indeed. First, we'll be kicking it off with a panel on discussion on higher education, then moving towards a look on real estate. Our third panel will be looking at financial institutions and how they've adapted throughout the pandemic. And we'll have a closing keynote from John Selden, the airport general manager of the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Of course, none of this could be possible without our sponsors, our gold sponsor, FIS, our silver sponsors, Jamestown and Peachtree Planning, our honored sponsors, Clayton County and University of West Georgia. Thank you. It is with your support that we can continue to attract and grow investments in the region. For those of you who've registered to today's forum, you'll be receiving a link to read this year's Invest Atlanta report complimentary. Lastly, I'd like to extend a big thank you to the team at Capital Analytics for producing one of the best reports yet on Atlanta. I could not be more proud of your work in light of such a challenging time that we had to put this report together. And now, please help me welcome our first panel, Inclusive Education, Diversity and its Impact on Upward Mobility. Our moderator today is Belle Whelan, the president of the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commissions on Colleges. Panelists, please turn on your cameras, and Belle, I invite you to introduce your panel.
I do that every time. Thank you very much, Abby. I'm going to ask each panelist if they would not only tell us their name and the institution over which they lead, but also what they've done during the pandemic that they didn't have time to do before the pandemic hit. So, Dr. French, let's start with you.
Thank you so much, Madam President, and it's always good to see you. Thank you, Abby, for the kind introduction. I'm George T. French Jr. I'm president of Clark Atlanta University. I'm relatively new to the Atlanta community, having been here for just over a year. Prior to that, I was president of Miles College in Birmingham, Alabama for almost 15 years. Glad to be here with you, Bill. And of course, during pandemic, we've transitioned nearly 4,000 students to an entirely online platform. So we are engaging teaching and learning in ways that we've never experienced before, but it's actually going quite well. The students are enjoying the learning experience, as are my faculty.
Wonderful. Dr. Zach.
Thank you very much. I'm Lee Zach. I'm the president of Agnes Scott College, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. As Dr. French mentioned, we also have transitioned to remote. Again, I have to thank our faculty and staff for the outstanding job that they did in doing that, and also our students and the rest of the community. And to your question, what have I done now that I haven't been doing before? I connected with my college roommates via Zoom, one of whom is a trustee at another college. So it's been really beneficial. So there are positive sides of COVID as well.
That's wonderful. Dr. Kelly?
Well, thank you, Dr. Whelan. We, at the University of West Georgia, we, like all of the other public universities in the state of Georgia, transitioned to remote as well, but then reopened during the fall using a hybrid model. At the University of West Georgia, it's very much dedicated to dual modality. As we go into spring, we will dedicate ourselves to a deeper face-to-face instruction. So this has been a giant experiment in 2020. And I think all of us learned a lot from it. Certainly the faculty and staff here at UWG have. And in terms of what have I done in the pandemic that I haven't done before? I came to Georgia on March 23rd, 2020. That's when I started this position. having left as chancellor of the University of South Carolina upstate beforehand. So I'm one of the handful of people who started a university presidency while the university was closed. There were no students, there were no employees. We were in a global pandemic, and that's been my hobby for the last 8 months.
Bless your heart. And Anne.
Hello, thank you so much, Abby, and thank you, Belle, very, very much. I am Ann Sclater, and I have the distinct honor to serve as the 10th president of Grinnell University for about 1.5 years. So I preceded the pandemic, thankfully, had a little bit of time. Before that, I will say that because we have a significant number of students in online remote programs and have done that for several decades, our pivot was not as difficult. In the fall, we came back to basically multiple modalities depending on the preference of the faculty and the students and the needs of the faculty and the students. And that will persist in the spring when we begin in January. Two things I'll say about the time, probably the most, we've been busy, I think, in our roles, but perhaps not traveling and some evening events. Brushing up on my Spanish through one of my apps, and that came in handy. We had a delegation from Panama here this week signing an agreement, so that came in handy. And then I've been able to attend our executive women's MBA programs, all their speakers, I think all of them, who brought just wonderful personal and professional development. But it's been fun to be able to fit more of those things in, and Zoom, of course, makes that possible. Delighted to be here.
That's wonderful. Thanks to each of you. The pandemic is on the forefront of everybody's minds. Can each of you tell me a little bit what lessons you've learned from having to move virtually or, sign up with PPPEs for everybody, or whatever the changes are that you've had to make as a result of the pandemic? And we'll start with you, Lee.
Well, I think the biggest lesson that we learned is there's nothing that we can't do, and also that we can do it quickly. And I think for academia, that's a very important lesson. We were able to transition overnight to remote learning. We had an early warning system for that through our summit program. So we had our eye on the world globally before that. And the speed with which our faculty and staff have been able to work remotely, and in the spring we'll be working in a blended manner, is just astonishing. So I think our biggest lesson is no matter what it is, you can do it, and as long as you're doing it together.
Excellent. George, what about you?
So I learned very, very similar to Lee, what it is that we can and can't do. This is the seal for Clark Atlanta University. And one of our mottos is I'll find a way or make one. So we've had to make a way when it looked like things were impossible. But what we really learned was the importance, Bill, of collaborative efforts as between faculty, students, and staff, and listening very closely to our students. And when you listen closely to the students, they'll tell you exactly what their needs are. And they actually come up with some very innovative ways of learning. And the second thing I've learned is the importance of emphasizing the mental health services for our students. Because our students have transitioned online. They're in all parts of the country in different and varying household challenges that we can't even imagine. But the importance of providing mental health services, even remotely, was very key for us.
Sure. President Kelly.
I would agree with my colleagues on all of those fronts, specifically mental health and the increasing need among students. And I would extend that to faculty and staff as well. Those are serious challenges that we have to be focused on to add services. And we certainly did. We added an online app that we made available to students, the Sharpen platform, over the summer to help build resiliency and help to address some of those mental health challenges. I would, in addition to the comments my colleagues made, the one thing that I would add is we probably just found a generation of young people who discovered how fragile the world is. And the one thing that was interesting to me as I've met with so many students is they never, ever stopped having high expectations for their own lives. And and believing in themselves and their future, despite the fact that we were facing such incredible challenges as a nation and as a world. And feeding those expectations, making certain that we don't forget about their ambition, and we provide higher education in a way that allows them to go and fuel that fire for years to come, was maybe not an obstacle that we needed to overcome as much as a reminder that that's what we should be investing in.
It gives me hope for the future. Dr. Sclater.
Well, I agree with all my colleagues. The point that I would add, 2 points. One is we figured out pretty quickly in our fabulous COVID task force on campus that we needed to not just put out rules, we needed to establish a culture. So we named it, and we named it the culture of prevention. And so every time there is something we're asking our faculty, staff, students to do, we frame it in terms of why this is part of the culture of prevention. Most recently, adding the flu shot as a critical part of our culture of prevention. Sure. But way back, we started with masks and 100% mask requirement. And we started, with distancing and all of that, and how we were going to make sure our classrooms were appropriate. So I think naming it and repeating that it's a culture we believe in. And when I hear other people use that outside of our group, little COVID task force, I'm heartened. And the second thing is just the incredible overlap between the personal and the academic, the personal and the intellectual, the emotional and the intellectual. So I'm so proud of our faculty when they talk about the fact that in their Zoom classes or in their partial Zoom, partial face-to-face, they're talking about how the students are doing in their lives, and their parents who may be first responders. We have a high degree of students who are first in their family to go to college. Some of their families are struggling and in these roles. And just talking about that before you launch into the material is critically important. It was always there, but I think it's named and it's celebrated and emphasized a little bit differently now. And probably to President Kelly's point, hopefully it will extend beyond this current situation.
Each of you has had to demonstrate probably a new level of leadership, or at least one that for which you had not necessarily been prepared prior to getting into your current positions. Dr. French, you have served 2 terms on NASICI, which is the National Advisory Committee on Institutional Quality and Integrity. That's an advisory committee to the U.S. Department of Education, and you've co-founded the Higher Education Leader Foundation. Can you talk a little bit about the skills that our new and upcoming leaders are going to need in higher education, and from where do we get those leaders?
So I think the skill sets are very important, Bill. In order to communicate with these constituents via Zoom, you have to really care about them. Okay, and individuals can tell when you care. My mom told me years ago, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And sometimes you have to emphasize how much you care to individuals when you're on Zoom calls and you're remote, and they want to know that you really do care about them. So those interpersonal, those soft skills seem to be more needed, much more needed than ever before. We have to keep in the forefront of our consciousness all of our constituents like never before, whether we're having town hall meetings virtually with faculty, staff, or students. We have to communicate with them because we don't see them every day. Many times when we were on campus, we saw our colleagues and we could encourage them and listen to some of their concerns on campus. But so we have to remember that we have to do those same things, check in on individuals and see how they're doing because we are remote. Those skill sets, of course, Bill, you know, from being the leader of SACS for the last 12 to 13 years, those skill sets are something that they almost have to be inherent when you care about individuals. But if they aren't, you have to go out of your way as a leader to make sure that people know that you love them. And if they know that you love them, they'll do anything in the world for you.
Thanks, George. And it's been 16 years, but who's counting?
16, wow. Congratulations. Yeah.
Dr. Kelly, since we're talking about inclusion and diversity, can you talk a little bit about UWG's and how they're deepening their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and specifically what changes have been made at the University Centers for Diversity and Inclusion?
Yeah, when I came as I'd just been named president, I visited the university, and one of the first groups I met with was students, and that was top of mind for them. So we immediately started working on deepening that commitment, and what that means really is reorganizing the university around trying to get better outcomes, and those outcomes have to be reflected in students' lives and experiences. So we had a pretty traditional chief diversity officer model that kind of floated in the executive space, but it wasn't producing the outcomes that the university was seeking. We were continuing to talk about them. So we tried something very new. We tried to put diversity and our work as close to our points of weakness as possible. One of the challenges at the University of West Georgia was diversifying the faculty. Making certain that our faculty represent the student population to which we're in service. And as a state university, the population of the state of Georgia as well.
Sure.
So we moved the academic initiatives associated with diversity, African American Male Initiative, which is a USG initiative, as well as Achieve Atlanta and others, into academic affairs, have a chief diversity officer that reports directly to the provost, focused on talent acquisition and diversifying the faculty. We took all of our initiatives for inclusion and actually coupled them with the Center for Student Involvement, so that inclusion wasn't something we did over here, but it's just the way in which we did our work in terms of the student experience. And then we immediately started equity audits across the university, and that process is just about to be completed. We have a consultancy that's assessing policy, procedure, and the way in which we do business, so that we make certain that we are a public university that functions and does business with a focus on getting everybody what they need, rather than assuming that that work is being done. So it's really putting a larger team on the field and making certain that we're honest about our performance and what we're trying to achieve.
That's excellent. In addition to the pandemic this year, especially in the city of Atlanta, we have experienced a major movement for social justice. President Zach, Agnes Scott's signature diversity program focuses primarily on examining the intersection of identity and social justice. Can you tell us a little about the impact that these programs have had on your students?
No, absolutely. And I also want to make one other connection for people who are listening today. And in particular, I want to thank Abby for inviting us, because the other aspect of our education is what happens in the workforce when our students leave our campuses. And we are focusing on diversity on our campus, but it's to create the diversity in the workplace. It's been proven by having diverse leadership, there is success. In institutions that have a diverse board are much more successful. That's why we're focusing on that at the higher education level. And at Agnes Scott, it's been part of our DNA. We are delighted that we have no ethnic, racial, or socioeconomic majority on our campus. It is extremely diverse. But as was mentioned, diversity doesn't always mean inclusive. And you have to work at being inclusive. And that's something that we focus on. In particular, through the Gay Johnson McDougall Center for Global Diversity and Inclusion, we sponsor programs and events, but they're not just for the Agnes Scott community, they're for the community broadly. We often partner with DeKalb County, the city of Atlanta, Decatur, to be able to do that programming. And I'm proud to say that Agnes Scott was chosen by the Association of American Colleges and Universities to host the Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Center.
Great.
Once again, this is something that involves not only our campus, but Decatur as well is our partner in that as well. So we see social justice as paramount, but we also see preparing our students for not only what they do on our campus, but what they do beyond our campus.
Excellent. President Sclater, can you talk a minute about what you would identify as the key components for making higher education a successful pathway for social mobility?
Yes, great question. And I want to agree with my colleagues and congratulate my colleagues for the progress they're making in this front. We're grateful here at Brenau that we have a very diverse population as well. About 46% of our students, grad and undergrad, identify as people of color. And then we have socioeconomic diversity, et cetera. And so we get on those lists of social mobility and diversity, and we're very proud of that. Not because we're on the list, but because of what we do. I would say some of the key components, as already been mentioned, it's about having a voice at the table. Once you have a seat at the table, having a voice at the table. So one of the things that our women's college focuses on every year is a theme, and it's called the Gold Program, where black and gold is our colors. And Dr. Deborah Dobkins, our dean there, this year has led an effort around the O, which is finding your voice. So our efforts have been all around finding the voice, students finding their voice. And so we've had a series of speakers, all through Zoom, but hundreds of people from the community and from the Brenau community being able to see that, but our students being able to see these role models, especially women for the women's college, to be able to see how they found their voice in their career. I could not agree more with President Zach about it's about what happens then when you graduate. So we're doing things like how to negotiate a salary that's fair and that is not reflective of any bias or discrimination. And it's really, really important that those things happen. So we are focusing this whole year on finding one's voice and creating one's community. And I'm pretty excited about what we're doing in that regard. I think the other thing for social mobility is individuals need to network. They need to meet other people who along their way will be able to help them advance. So we have mentoring programs with our alumni, and I know other institutions do as well, and other leaders, because our students need to graduate with somewhat of a network and go forth with that network, especially if they're first in their family to go to college and their family is not able to provide that network. It's very important that they develop it. And we know that once a student graduates, they're far more likely to have a family that then graduates from college, especially when the woman is educated.
Thanks. With the last 90 seconds of this panel, I'm going to ask you to tell me, as we end the fall semester, what makes you optimistic about the future? I'm going to start with you, Dr. French. Remember, total 90 seconds for the group.
All right. What makes me optimistic about the future is for the opportunity to expand our online capacity and reach more students than ever.
Excellent. Dr. Zach?
What makes me optimistic every day, and that's our students. They're the future. They make me optimistic. I can't wait to see them.
Excellent. Dr. Kelly?
I'm going to agree with Dr. Zach. That energy, that's why all of us are in higher education, because you are a part of a community where everybody is going someplace better.
And the final word to Dr. Sclater.
Well, I can't agree more. The students, but also what happens, the magic that happens between the students and the faculty and those who support them every day. It is why we do what we do.
I thank you all for participating. More importantly, I thank you for all you do
on,
every day for students.
For pictures, just smile, please.
Thank you, Belle.
Great, thank you all.
Great job, Bill.
Thank you again
all
to our first panel today for their contribution to from what is a very urgent discussion around education and the opportunity that everyone should have for upward mobility in this country. I appreciate you all being here today. As many of you know, I'm Jack Miller, the Regional Director at Capital Analytics. I oversee 9 markets throughout the East Coast, and getting to know the Atlanta market has truly been a pleasure. I wish I could be with you all in person today, but I look forward to when we can gather again and further get to know even better those of you who I've been fortunate to already meet. I want to add my appreciation as well for all of you supporting this year's publication and this event today. Through my conversations with you, I have been over the moon with your compliments on the global platform we have created for Metro Atlanta. While 2020 has been challenging, we do look forward to working with you long-term towards the continued growth and development of this region as we update the report each year. It's now my pleasure to introduce our second panel today, entitled Looking Towards 2021, What the Future Holds for Atlanta's Real Estate Market. I would like to introduce the moderator for the panel, Jeff Shaw, partner at Bridge Investment Group and CEO of Bridge Commercial Real Estate. Jeff, I turn it over to you to further introduce the panel, and for the panelists, if you could please turn on your videos and unmute yourselves.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. Looking forward to 2021, what the future holds for Atlanta real estate market. That could be ominous, or it could be exciting and full of opportunity. So I prefer the latter. I'm Jeff Shaw. I'm a partner with Bridge Investment Group, and I'm the CEO of our office operating company, Bridge Commercial Real Estate. So Bridge has about 22 billion in assets under management. We have about 14.5 million square feet of office space across 15 states. And I'm an old broker, been doing this about 25 years nationally, and I'm based here in Atlanta. We have an all-star panel. Kim Rousseau is the managing principal at Perkins & Will. She has years of expertise in design, working around the globe for notable Fortune 500 companies. She's worked with healthcare systems, universities, and multifamily developers. It's great to have you. And Matt Bronfman, he's the principal and CEO of Jamestown Properties. He's responsible for managing Jamestown's global operations, corporate strategy, and execution. Matt has more than 25 years of experience in real estate, leading acquisitions, redevelopment, and oversight of projects like Pond City Market, where my daughters have done some impressive shopping. So it's great to have you.
We appreciate it. Those tenants are on percentage rent clauses.
Right. And of course, Michael Russell, he's the CEO of H.J. Russell & Company. He has extensive development and oversight experience managing challenging, exciting developments and construction projects. He leads a 1,300 person firm that has helped to build much of Atlanta's skyline. That includes the Coca-Cola headquarters, 191 Peachtree, and Atlanta City Hall. So we've got a great group. Thanks everybody for being here. Time is short, so let's go ahead and hop right into it. So let's go around the panel and tell us, what was the initial reaction from your organization to the pandemic, and how did this translate into immediate action? And of course, if I missed anything about you or your firm that you want to add, feel free. Mr. Russell, you want to start us off?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. And what was the reaction? One was, uncertainty. What was this? What was the impact? I'm sure it wouldn't last more than 90 days. So we were all preparing for what we thought was more of a short-term impact, but pleasantly surprised and pleased with how we have been able to adjust, and working remotely, and the ability of people to stay focused and continue, to get things done. Obviously, I have construction projects, which fortunately here in Georgia, frankly, it was considered essential work. So construction never stopped, which for my business certainly was helpful, and we were able to adjust and do the things that you needed to do to work in a safe environment. I mean, obviously it has had impacts, but overall we have been very fortunate, and we've been able to keep things moving forward. So certainly uncertainty, Jeff, in the beginning, but adapting, and fortunately, I think my team has been pretty nimble in moving forward.
Did you run into any major supply chain issues as a result on those sides?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say major. We certainly ran into some. Most were around things that came from China. It's as simple as door hinges. If you have doors, you can't hang doors without hinges. So a lot of the hinges were from China, and that was an impact. But overall, again, nothing that stopped the job, but things that impacted it, but not where, it stopped the complete progress.
Thanks. How about you, Kim? How did your organization respond to the pandemic?
Well, having a robust healthcare practice, we started with focusing on safety and then science, and letting that guide our protocols. And so then we assessed the situation and quickly sent people home and invested in technology. So that really gave us the infrastructure to work. And then we let people just breathe. And we said, everyone take time to adjust. Clients, we're here for you, but we understand this is amazing times. So we're here for you when you need us, and our staff adjusted quickly.
So what kind of projects is your firm keeping busy with right now through the, with this economic cycle?
We're a diversified practice, so that's great. Our healthcare practice is getting back into the regularly scheduled projects. Earlier in the pandemic, they were looking at field hospitals and projects reacting to the health problem. Higher education, actually, to the point of the panel before us, is still active in the Southeast. So I think that's a really positive thing for our area. And we see that our office market is still gangbusters with studies. So it's been really nice to see people very optimistic about what can be once we come out of this.
Yeah, that's been fascinating for us because we have well over 1,000 tenants, and we're looking like from an activity perspective of new leases and design and inquiries that we're actually not that far off from where we were last year, even though we're only sitting at about 61%, in occupancy of our buildings. So it's been pretty fascinating. It's probably a really good sign that how people are looking at this. How about you, Matt? Thinking about Ponce City Market, how did you guys respond?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you all. I would say a few things. First off, we were relatively early, through some luck on our part, to try to be proactive about this. As early as the beginning of February, we started taking proactive steps to try to make sure everybody could work remotely, making sure everything was set up well. And part of that was, in a funny way, almost luck. I mean, we have a European presence, and I was traveling in Milan, Italy at the end of January, early February. Yeah. So we were we were very much aware and that was kind of the epicenter back in February of what was going on. So we sort of had some signs that some bad things were coming our direction. So we were pretty early trying to be proactive. I would say we've done two things that have taken up a lot of our time. One is, very early, we set up a tenant portal where all our tenants could access best information, from how to apply for a PPP loan to how to do better at carry out, where we had all our tenants kind of crowdsourcing best information. And we have a vice president of tech and innovation, and they were spending a lot of time on this to make sure that we had best practices around safety, how you could pay, without having to touch anything, and how we could do how people could do drop off and things like that. So this tenant portal has really been great. And we know we've had literally, thousands and thousands of tenants utilizing it. The other thing we did is we realized it was going to take a little bit more than just a tenant portal for a lot of these tenants. And we set up our own $50 million relief fund for our tenants. And that was made available, for example, for those tenants who were having trouble accessing PPP loans. It was taking them longer, or they got rejected. And so we were able to loan them money for that. Or, for example, if they needed to redo their space, make it work better in a pandemic, it was money set aside for that. So that money has come in handy. And at Ponce, I think we've seen the benefits of that. Or in Buckhead, where, we eliminated, if you know where Bilbo K restaurant is, we eliminated 2 of the streets around it and turned it into outdoor seating. And we invested heavily in heaters and whatnot, so that come the winter, that seating would still be available. So, we've done a lot of those things, from the portal to making loans to our tenants. We've been aggressive with rent deferrals. And so we've tried to be really ahead of the curve and making sure our tenants would survive and be in a position to thrive going forward.
Yeah, that does seem to be a theme. It seems that the landlords that have stepped up early, jumped on it quickly, helped with PPP and PPE and communicated and provided those tools, they're seeing that their reoccupancy came a lot more quickly. And so, there's no doubt that you guys have been doing an exceptional job. Kim, I have a question for you. So from a design and architecture perspective, what trends did the pandemic help disrupt or accelerate?
Well, it probably goes without saying that health and well-being is going to become part of our DNA. But we think that really once people get past this initial shock of this pandemic, that resilience is going to be an important discussion point. And we hear it in different ways from our clients. They'll talk about flexibility, they'll talk about uncertainty. So we think resilience, which is the ability to recover and regenerate once a shock has happened. Convergence, we see a lot of programs coming together, different types of projects and clients. And then finally, this remote connecting. And a lot of people will say remote work, but I'm saying connecting because we're seeing it in healthcare, you know, the telemedicine, higher education, learning. I think what's going to happen next year is really how do we address this hybrid, which is not this lockdown.
I know from an office perspective, you know, we've done hundreds of leases over the pandemic, which has really been interesting. And most of the designs that we're seeing are still staying, you know, they're not many people seem to be designing for something in the future. They're looking at this as a short-term crisis. They're redoing their business plans, their budgets for next year. They're maybe looking at some hub and spoke models where you're opening satellite offices and looking at how to make maybe some of the core city offices more centralized and for the corporate and meeting space. And so it's been interesting to see how different companies have thought through it. Michael, quick question then. So Atlanta remains affordable, you know, when we compare us to other major metropolitan areas. You know, how can the region continue to work together to ensure Atlanta remains affordable for a diverse population? And how will we gentrify, you know, how will the gentrification play into it?
Well, obviously, yeah, Atlanta is relatively affordable, but it has a lot of the same dynamics of other major cities around gentrification and affordability. I mean, I think you just said the word together. What collective forces are really working towards improving this situation? I think it starts with municipalities and counties. You know, how making zoning more appealing for mixed use, mixed income type of communities. That's big, and also counties helping. I mean, at the end of the day, developers like you, yourself, all of us on this phone understand it has to make economic sense. So we have to find a way for ways to offset some of the expenses related to these developments. So counties, municipalities may be helping with infrastructure cost. We also are seeing, you know, different things like tax allocation districts or tax abatement, you know, capital ground leases, I think different funds are out there now that are focusing on affordable housing that, you know, have, you know, different economic returns maybe than some other funds. So all of these things have to be looked at and have to be looked at collaboratively by all the stakeholders. So that's one thing. And I think gentrification, you know, I mean, that's really kind of a mindset. I think it has to be very intentional of the stakeholders around, from the new residents to the old residents to the, you know, government to public safety. I think everybody has to work together to work through gentrification and make sure that you keep some legacy in these communities. And I don't have a, you know, I don't, Max and yourself, Jeff, everybody, and Kim, I know they all are sensitive and in tune with this, but I just think it has to be very intentional. And you have to have the different stakeholders involved in this working together to be able to have a community that doesn't lose all of the historical legacy that, you know, it's had in the past.
I agree. Thank you, Michael. And so yesterday I was talking with Atlanta Business Development. There's actually a lot of larger companies that are looking from other cities that are coming into Atlanta. One of the big, one of the interesting things he said is that, of course, Atlanta is just such a major tech hub and has gotten that reputation. So you're seeing companies coming out of San Francisco and New York, they're really kind of looking at Atlanta for all the great things that it is. And so with the rise, so Matt, let me ask you, so with a rise of e-commerce, disruption of traditional retail, you know, what steps do we need to take to ensure that Atlanta can accommodate the needs of retailers and manufacturers and distributors?
I'd say it's a few things. I mean, number one, it's what Michael was just talking about. It's making sure we continue to have affordability. One of Atlanta's strengths, as you referenced, Jeff, is we are more affordable. It's all relative. We are more affordable than some of our competitors. If you look at the 10 major cities, we're more affordable than almost all our competitors of the top 10 cities. But we have to be intentional about how we maintain that. And we've got to get more creative about having affordable housing options. And I think Michael laid out a lot of the things, but we need to be proactive and really at the cutting edge of how we do this. And we've got some advantages, actually. The city of Atlanta and its various affiliates, the Housing Authority, Invest Atlanta, own a lot of real estate. You know, in some cities like New York, DC, San Francisco, they don't have those natural resources of a municipality that owns a lot of acres. I don't remember the number, but it's a lot. Let's leave it as it's a lot of acres. And how can we put that into production, whether it's getting creative with ground lease structures to developers, requiring a certain amount of affordable housing or what have you. But there's got to be some creative ways that we can leverage the fact that the city and its affiliates own a lot of property. So, you know, affordability is really key. I think Atlanta does not have as strong let's call it private equity venture capital of some other cities. I think it's growing. I think Michael is doing some interesting things in that space, in particular, what he just did with, you know, like Tony Ressler. But I think if you compare us to some other cities, we don't have as much private equity. I think it'd be great if we had more of that venture capital funding. I see it from my tenants at Ponce and other places. A lot of them have got their early funding, not from Atlanta, but not just San Francisco and New York, but even Austin and Nashville. So I think growing that business, I think would be great. But, you know, I think we have the good building blocks. We have Georgia Tech, we have SCAD, we have Georgia State, we've got affordable housing, we've got a good amount of public parks, especially around the Midtown area, which has become a hub. When the Beltline is such an important part of the story around Atlanta right now, nationally. I mean, the Beltline gets a lot of accolades, and I talk to tenants all the time who want to be somewhere along the Beltline. So, you know, we have our strengths and we just need to continue to emphasize those.
That's great. And so the panel's 2021, you know, what the future holds, you know, for Atlanta, you know, as it relates to each of you in your segments, what would you identify as some of the most exciting innovations and opportunities that are stemming from the challenges that have presented in this pandemic, you know, that you think is going to shape, you know, the future of Atlanta? Kim, you want to take that first?
I do. Okay. I'm very excited about it.
I had a big smile, so I'm going to make sure you got it.
Well, I mean, I think what's been great is that people recognize the built environment and its impact on your safety and health. But what we can do in the future is understand how we can use our built environment to transcend and really do what's good for our soul and our community. And especially in Atlanta, because of our history of civil rights and diversity and trying to focus on rebuilding into a better Phoenix, I think we have the opportunity to be a shining example of what architecture and design is to the country.
That's great. Michael, you want to take a shot?
Well, what strikes me is some of the challenges we've had this year around social equity and inequities. I think Atlanta is uniquely positioned to be a leader in that initiative also of just, you know, working together as a community. It's always had a history. The business community in Atlanta in particular has always had a history of engaging in issues that affect the overall community. Mm-hmm. And I'm hopeful that you know, we'll see movement in 21. And I know it's a lot of thought process, a lot of initiatives around social equity and how do we be more intentional of working towards a more equitable society. And I think Atlanta, you know, to me, just the demographics of this city, that the history of this city is positioned to be a leader as we look into the future of moving in a positive direction around the social equity issue.
Agree. Matt, do you have any thoughts?
I'll say a few things. First off, I think going back to what we discussed before, Atlanta's always been relatively affordable. But I think tying into some of what Kim was saying, part of the premise for me at Ponce City Market was to do something that was a little bit different, that was non-commodity. So much of the office space in Atlanta is, call it a glass tower on or near Peachtree Street. Right. And I think one of the trends that will continue to shape Atlanta is how can we curate and cultivate more interesting spaces? Because I think the facts are clear that the next generation doesn't necessarily want to work in their father's or grandfather's office building or mother's or grandmother's office building. They want something a little bit more authentic, more interesting. And how do we provide that is become increasingly important versus purely thinking about having, you know, the same old office space. The other innovation I think that's really interesting is working with prop tech companies. There's so much interesting going on where you can use an app when you're at the office to have, whether it's as simple as your lunch delivered, deal with your dry cleaning, get a light bulb changed, and also cheaper materials through prefab construction. The tech world and the prop tech world is at a really interesting place right now. And then, you know, the trend towards, I think the Sunbelt cities like Atlanta to some degree appear to be winners in the pandemic world. The fact of less density, where, you know, I think you're seeing a clear trend. I think we're big investors in New York, but I think it's going to take longer for places like New York and downtown San Francisco to rebound, which is, and I believe in those cities long term, but for the next few years, I think places like Atlanta have the opportunity to really shine.
That's great. So from a live, work, and play perspective, obviously that was a huge model the last 8 years, something that Matt, you guys did an exceptional job with the Ponce City Market model. You know, are we seeing that model is evolving from the pandemic? You know, do you think, how much of a catalyst do you think that the pandemic will be for development in the suburbs and, you know, moving forward, you know, as far as with that versus urban centers? Anybody want to take that one on first?
For us, we've always believed in delivering interesting places. It can be in the city, like Ponce City Market. It can be some of the more suburban stuff we've done, like around on the outside of San Francisco. We think the key is providing an interesting space where you can build community, where you can have a community hub. If it's not a community hub, if it's not interesting, then people might as well stay in their pajamas and stay home. And that's true for retail, and it's true for office, where people increasingly are comfortable working from home. So I don't so much divide as much as maybe some other people do between city and suburban, though I do think this can be a good time for suburban. I draw a distinction between providing an interesting work environment with a feeling of being part of a community center and that sort of thing versus what I would call very commodity, boring environments where are kind of soulless, where it's just not compelling to go. And again, in a world where you can do so much in your pajamas, why would I bother to go to a place that's boring and commodity?
Right, and we're running out of time. So Kim, do you have any other comments, or Michael, on that question?
I did want to say that to the comment of live, work, play, we're just calling it living these days because, it's including sports and recreation. It's got health, facilities. It has affordable housing. And so it's starting to reflect a true community and not just a fabricated kind of multifamily, hospitality, retail, and office. So we're very excited about that.
That's great. Mr. Russell?
I think Kim and Matt have covered that well. Mm-hmm. So we can move on.
Yeah, so I would just say there was a question from the audience that said, do you feel that many office space, office buildings are going to prosper? And I think it ties right into this, exactly what we're talking about. The owners that have invested in those properties and put in the amenity spaces and have created an environment that people want to be a part of and have walkability, have access to public transportation. all of those things. There's certainly going to be some winners and losers as we come through 2021, but I think that those in both in downtown and suburban markets that have done that are going to be in really good shape. So thank you all so much. This has been great. They should have given us 2 hours, but unfortunately they did not. So thanks a lot, and Max, we'll send it back to you.
Everyone can just smile, and we'll take a group photo. Great, thank you very much.
Okay,
thank you all for being here today and for the discussion that you provided. We appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
I now have the pleasure to introduce our final panel today, financial institutions and their adaptation to the virtual world. Moderating this panel is Cindy Davis, Chair of the Banking and Finance Practice at Greenberg Traurig. While she's coming on, just want to remind everyone again, the link to the report as well as to this event will be sent to all registered attendees following the event. Cindy, great to have you here with us today.
Hello.
I'm going to turn it over to you now to introduce your panel. If all the panelists could please turn on your videos and unmute yourselves.
All right, great. Good morning, everyone. I'm Cindy Davis. I am a shareholder with Greenberg Traurig in the Atlanta office. Greenberg is an international law firm with about 2,200 lawyers in 40 locations throughout the US, Europe, Latin America, Asia. And I chair the firm's banking and finance practice. So I have seen firsthand this year how hectic the pandemic has been for financial institutions, addressing both their customers' needs and their own employees' needs, as well as the business community generally. So we have a great panel. That's what we're going to talk about, the impact of the virtual world on financial institutions. And our panel today, we've got 2 bankers, someone from the fintech sector, as well as tax and financial planning. So I'm going to let each of my panelists introduce themselves and just tell us quickly a little bit about themselves and what they do with their organization. Randy, why don't we start with you?
Great, thank you. My name is Randy Kapork. I serve as a regional president for the Georgia market for Fifth Third Bank. I've been a 30-plus year member of this industry, and I lead our Georgia team here for Fifth Third, and looking forward to the time today, so thank you.
James?
Hi, I'm James Nefko. I'm a managing director with Peachtree Planning, a comprehensive financial planning firm based here in Atlanta, but with a Southeast presence and clients all over the country. I think unique in our planning is the comprehensive nature, not just financial markets, but also estate planning, tax planning, charitable planning. Very much appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today.
Great. Melissa, why don't you go next?
Absolutely. Melissa Jankowski. I am the division executive for debit, credit, ATM, and software for FIS, which is a leading payments industry expert and technology provider.
And Matt.
Hi, thanks, Cindy. My name is Matt Rappaport. I'm the business development officer and regional sales manager for Wells Fargo's commercial banking here in Georgia. I'm actually brand new to Atlanta. I moved September 1st from sunny South Florida. So it's great to be with all of you, and I look forward to our conversation today.
Well, that must have been fun to move during the pandemic. I'm sure it was
it was a blast.
Yeah. Well, why don't we all start and just go around the panel and have each of you tell us what effect the pandemic had on your organization and what actions your organization did to minimize those impacts. Matt, since you went last time, why don't you start us off?
Sure. As I mentioned, I am new to Atlanta, but Wells Fargo prides itself on having great relationships with our clients, and we want to help them succeed financially. Obviously, when you have a pandemic such as COVID-19, there isn't a playbook to necessarily follow. However, by having constant communication, we were able to be nimble with our clients and help them address both short-term and long-term changes to their businesses. So it's been a very interesting past 7 months, and it's definitely ever evolving. But the good news is we're supporting our clients, and I'm sure we'll talk about later, but through the CARES Act and PPP loans. So.
Okay, great. Melissa, how about you?
Absolutely. Well, the pandemic was a surprise to everybody, and no one on today's call would be surprised by that statement. But FIS was really in a good position to pivot rather quickly. We took a very prescriptive approach in how we were monitoring and reacting. Our focus, we kind of began with our employee safety and health. Then we very quickly shifted to looking at critical infrastructure to ensure that we were addressing the needs of our partners, not only our partners, but our partners, consumers, and client base as well. We started and very quickly were able to pivot about 90% of our workforce into a work from home environment, helping them set up their home base in order to be responsive to our partners across the board. We did this in every country that we currently do business in. And as we looked at the critical infrastructure, we also evaluated what types of solutions did we need to make available to ensure that we continued commerce and everyone was able to have access to funds. Everyone was able to have access to money movement. We were able to launch or produce the pandemic EBT card, which really allowed consumers to gain access to governmental funds in order to make the required and necessary purchases that they needed. Within 90 days, we developed the PPP platform that provided real-time lending capabilities. In order to ensure that our partners were able to onboard and continue to move and progress forward, we also stood up a remote implementation process. So we really focused on ensuring that we were able to continue and that all of our partners within each of our ecosystems were also able to continue to drive their businesses forward. As I contemplate kind of the payments realm, which is really where I sit, April was a hard month. That was the month we took probably the biggest hit in the volumes that we saw. The economy's flirting with recovery. And as FIS continues to evaluate the flirting with recovery, we're really focusing our energy around relief, recovery, and rebuilding. And so that's what you're going to see from us as we continue to progress through this.
Okay, great. Randy, what about Fifth Third?
Yeah, I think for us, the first and foremost was our employees. I think many of the panelists talked about that, and it was real important that we had to make sure the safety of our employees. Luckily, financial institutions have to spend a lot of time in disaster recovery and things like that. So the ability to pivot, I don't think we've all planned for pandemic, but we had to kind of use the playbook, so to speak, to make sure that our employees are safe and that we're putting them in the right position to take care of themselves and their families. Then we look at our customers, and we'll talk more about that and kind of what we did with PPP. We also did an outreach program with our clients, and we made over 3 million phone calls to clients proactively to talk about as we were transitioning people away from the office. We did keep our financial centers open. I think it's important to know that we're an essential business and people want to feel safe and secure that they have access. So kudos to our teammates who came in, day out of our retail distribution centers to be able to serve customers. And then we also had to have the migration for our employees. We typically only had 5% of our workforce working remotely. And we literally overnight had to turn that into 75, 80%. So pretty taxing on our servers and things like that to do it. But kudos to our IT teams who really stepped up and helped us be able to not miss a beat. And as we transitioned, the thing that was interesting is not only we were working from home more, but we were also doing it with the pressures of having to deliver to our clients for PPP So it was really kind of a perfect storm that came together, but we're real proud of how we've handled that. And we'll talk more about that later too, but really excited about what we did for our customers.
Okay. Great. James, with that on your end.
Yeah, being in the trenches with individuals, clients, business owners, I mean, I'm stating the obvious by saying we've been helping them navigate through a time of extreme uncertainty, not just in the continuation of the pandemic and its impact on the economy, markets, and all of us as human beings generally, but also the continuation of massive debt and deficit spending. And I think one of the immediate unknowns is whether or not there's going to be ongoing fiscal stimulus. So we've been leaning into that uncertainty and helping guide our clients, both individuals and business owners, through that. We're educating them when appropriate, revisiting their plans, making tweaks to their plans, and helping them keep their eye on their long-term aspirations and their objectives. So we've leaned into this, trying to help others have confidence that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And in regards to all of our advisors here, we're being very conscious of their uncertainties and their family situation, and really trying to help them master the virtual client interaction. There's an element of humanity that I think we miss out on, especially in being in a very relationship-driven business. So we're trying to navigate through that as best as possible, but we're certainly looking forward to being face-to-face with our clients very soon.
Yeah.
Hey, real quick, Jim comment on about the relationship aspect. I think people realized during this was the importance of having those relationships that have been cemented, where I think people over time may have relied on the technical distribution maybe too much at the detriment of having a personal relationship. And we saw many clients or people who weren't our customers desperately coming to us during the PPP, where they had a bank account, but not a banking relationship. And those that had a deep relationship invested with, whether it's us or whether it's Wells Fargo, whoever, probably had an easier time navigating those initial kind of panic moments when people were wanting to access some of the relief. And I think that's really important. But it also highlights, though, that your need to align yourself with a financial institution partner that has the kind of capabilities that somebody like an FIS or others help bring to the table, because you want to interact digitally and you want to have that connectivity, as Jim mentioned. But boy, at the end of the day, you've got to have that relationship when you really need to step up and get help that you need. And we saw many clients that were desperately seeking that.
And that's a good point. Let's talk a little bit more about those PPP loans. Matt and Randy, as our two bankers on the panel, would you address your key takeaways from the PPP loans, CARES Act, and the impact on the business community? What other guidance you were giving to your customers about stimulus or other things to do?
Yeah, I think initially it was people saw the relief out there and just wanted access. They didn't want to be left out. So there was this initial kind of somewhat of a panic because people didn't understand the rules. Even bankers weren't quite really sure. It was changing day to day about how are we going to distribute. Then it became the issue of we're going to put more volume in our system on this SBA kind of product than we do like an entire year. We're going to do, well, actually it's probably 5 or 6 years worth of volume we did in a matter of a month. So we were very specific on making sure we had an automated process to be able to distribute and accept the loan applications so that our customers knew where they stood in that process. But it was bumpy. And initially when people were wanting that application in, and when we launched digitally, it made a huge difference to help kind of make people understand the flow of the product. I think we're all eagerly looking to see what's next. How do we continue? I think, as Jim mentioned, I think there's anxiety out there. What could be next? And we got caught in the middle of a political debate and an election. But at the end of the day, I think we're ready for what the next wave might look like to help our customers.
Mm-hmm.
I would add similar thoughts to Randy there. Obviously, small businesses are critical to our economy, and the program of the CARES Act and PPP had every intention of being wonderful. I think, to Randy's point, I think all institutions experience a little bit of bumpiness. Our institution also tried to automate the process to make it more user-friendly and have that transparency as you move through the process. I think, as it relates to here in the Metro Atlanta area, I think we're very proud of the fact that we were able to help so many businesses. I've got a few quick stats that I was able to kind of pull, and we approved a little over 9,994 PPP loans in Georgia. That totaled $411 million, and that impacted over 55,000 employees. The average loan to a business was the business had 6 employees or less. And when you look at the concentration of the loans that were dispersed, in the end, 93% of those loans were less than $100,000. So strategically at Wells Fargo, we really focused, to Randy's point, on taking care of our existing clients that we had relationships with, we had dialogue, and we really focused in on the small businesses that needed the funds most. But it very much was very chaotic as the program was rolled out. As the program kind of solidified, the bankers on the team were able to speak with more certainty. But early on in the process, it was rather difficult because it was a new program in a very stressful period of time.
Right, and I know there was some uncertainty as far as how they would be treated for tax purposes. So James, can you address the challenges everybody has been facing with these stimulus measures for tax season and how they're preparing for that?
Yeah, because it's really impacting small, medium-sized business owners and individuals as well, right? Randy and Matt both mentioned PPP, and that was a nightmare helping clients navigate through that because the rules were changing almost on a daily basis. So now, really what we're focused on as a firm with our business owners who have taken those loans, strategies to maximize forgiveness, right? And helping them make sure that they're set up and following the rules in a way that will give them maximum forgiveness. For a lot of our individual clients, you think about some of the tax impact in the CARES legislation. Should they or should they not take RMDs this year? They don't have to take RMDs. What about the new rules in regards to charitable planning or coronavirus-related distributions from their retirement accounts? So a lot of uncertainty, and I'll add on top of that, it seems like a lifetime ago to me, but at the beginning of this year, we saw the introduction of the Secure Act, which really has significant implications on the way retirement assets are distributed upon death. So, I think at the end of the day, it really is important to have a team of professionals, each with their own area of specialty that can really circle around the client to help them make good, sound, strategic decisions, to make sure that they are getting maximum use of these, the constant changing environment coming out of DC.
Okay. And Melissa, can you address the impact on the fintech and payment processing companies? What's changing as far as the economy as it reopens for these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. So, good or bad, certainly there are impacts across the board. Fintechs, in general, kind of looking at them in whole, I would say some are probably more impacted than others will be impacted. In my mind, the biggest implication for fintechs today is investor funding. As they contemplate, what investors are going to want to invest in this new environment, they're going to have to really rely on what has made them successful, which is being very agile and shifting and changing based on market needs. But, as I think about who or what the likely winners might be doing versus those that will likely be challenged, and kind of the areas that really kind of fall within that gray category, I think, those fintechs that are focusing on that digital or mobile P2P environment, the mobile banking environment, consumers are looking for creative ways to continue to transact and do business, but not necessarily in a face-to-face environment. Again, when you think about investment, deposits and savings are going to be huge. Consumers are trying to figure out, what is going to be happening in this new environment. Unemployment is on a rise, so consumers are going to be hanging on to the cash flow, just as investors would be thinking kind of the same way. We've experienced an increase in fraud in today's market. So those fintechs that think about how and ways that they can continue to detect and identify fraud will likely be some of the winners as they kind of come out of today's kind of environment. Some of the challenging areas, the market's slowing. So digital B2B payments are seeing a high level of decline. So, what can the fintechs think to do around that segment to help from a transactional perspective there? We heard a little bit earlier talking about needing that traditional banking relationship, and the felt kind of impact for those that were maybe going to those challenger banks in order to have, that banking relationship without the white glove kind of approach. I think that there's going to be some challenge around those markets. A little bit of the gray will be kind of that lending segment. Traditionally, lending is going to be lower because access to funds is going to be harder to obtain, especially with unemployment levels potentially on the rise. That being said, I put it in a little bit of a gray category because I think those fintechs that focus on, how they go about maybe that pre-post installment loan type options for access to funds, allowing consumers to figure out ways to maybe spend, but have a payment option in order to, pay for the spend that they're wanting to do. So I think that there's some areas that are going to feel a little gray, but I do believe that there's opportunity. And I believe that the segment that can cycle through this opportunity is absolutely the fintechs, because they've proven to be very agile and creative in these types of markets.
Okay, well, great. Well, as we wrap up the panel, why don't we have everybody just address what you think the most challenging innovation and opportunity has been that's come out of this pandemic that can help businesses and individuals going forward. Randy, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback a little bit what Melissa just said. I think it's hard. You don't hear very often when people say, what good has come out of this pandemic? But
That'd be something.
Yeah, you're right. But I think you will see some things, and we're seeing them with our clients. People who were exposed when they were handling how they were going to handle their accounts payable function, where they were heavily relied on in-office staff, are now looking at innovation that we're bringing forward around automating the accounts payable process on the business account side. Same with accounts receivable automation. Those types of things businesses are looking to, not only from it's somewhat a little more friendly if people aren't in the office to be able to do that work, but it's also a cost-effective measure in which to digitize that part of their business. And I do think this pandemic, to Melissa's earlier point, has really accelerated those that have already were on their roadmap set to do more digital adoption, probably had a chance to benefit from some of the disruption of the pandemic. But the good part of this is it's accelerating other digital adoption. I was fortunate to work on the Zelle product that banks use specifically on moving P2P money. I think you're seeing digital adoption around that type of spending or sharing is accelerated. Our mobile adoption in the bank at Fifth Third has increased dramatically during this process. So there are some goods here that we'll see of the way people are going to move forward in complementing the digital adoption with that personal relationship.
James, what are your thoughts?
So I'll go back to previous points that we made earlier. I think it's the the understanding of the primary importance of relationship with the client, being aware of the emotions that they have, but not making decisions based on emotion going forward. Having that clear roadmap, navigating through the uncertainty, through the changes, right? We're likely to see some pretty significant tax policy changes, and just really walking alongside the client every step along the way, helping them keep their eyes fixed on the optimism that lies before all of us, having a clear financial roadmap to be able to make that happen. So relationships continue to win the day, for sure.
Yeah. Melissa?
Absolutely. I'm probably going to piggyback again on Randy's comments, because I think the thing that I'm most excited about is the advancement of the contactless initiatives that have really been attempting to be adopted and pushed within the marketplace. This pandemic certainly has elevated our push to move that forward rather quickly. I too had brought some statistics around that because I think they're very telling. When you start looking at contactless cards, 9 out of 10 of the top issuers rolled out contactless cards to consumers. 250 of the top 300 face-to-face merchants accept contactless today. 190 million contactless cards were issued in the US since April of 2020, so this year. 300 million contactless cards are expected to be in the market by the end of this year. I mean, those are just phenomenal movement points that are really pushing us to really adopt and adapt to some of the technology that's been presented to us over the last several years. So to me, that is very exciting, and I'm glad to finally see us getting to that point.
Yeah. What about you, Matt? What do you think?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but yes, payments we're in a fascinating period because if you think about it, before COVID, everything was so paper driven, right? You required someone in your office setting to present and handle the checks. Someone's printing them, someone's going to accounting to get them initiated. That's all gone away. With push to card and disbursements with Zelle, as Melissa and Randy pointed out, the funds are able to flow much more efficiently, and from a fraud perspective, they're a lot more secure. So that's exciting for us across the industry. I think the other thing that is also interesting is when you take a step back and you think about how businesses pivoted and how financial institutions helped with that pivot. I think of an example where we were able to help here in Atlanta, someone in the dining sector who provides a platform for a lot of other entrepreneurs. We were able to support them very early on in Q1, as you've seen takeout and delivery just skyrocket. Had we not had that prior relationship with them, we probably would have been in a more troubling position. But I'm just amazed by the entrepreneurial spirit here in Atlanta and how nimble businesses have been through this process.
Yeah, very true. And I know I am pleasantly surprised how well everybody did working from home. I was a doubter, but what was that, Randy?
I said we would like to see a few more of them come back.
Yeah, we would. Well, I think we are out of time, so I wanted to thank you all for joining us today, and I will send it back.
Don't forget, we just need everyone to smile before you leave. So if I could get everyone to smile. Oh, looking great. Thank you. Fabulous. Thank you again, Finance Panel. And I want to just take a moment to thank everyone who's been a part of today's event, our speakers, our moderators, our panelists, our sponsors, and lastly, our closing keynote. So it is my pleasure to welcome John Selden, the Airport General Manager of the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, to give our closing remarks. I can't think of, well, there's been many industries, obviously, that have been disruptive, but aviation has definitely been one of them. So I'm very much looking forward to John's comments on how one of the busiest airports has tackled these challenges brought on by an unprecedented pandemic. John, it's great to see you. And with that, I will hand it on over to you.
Hello, Abby. How are you? I think my camera's a little fuzzy here. Technology issues. We'll try one more time. All right. See if that works. It's still working. Thank you for having me. This is a great panel here. I'm honored to speak here as your closing remarks here for your Focus Atlanta. Hartsfield-Jackson is the largest employer here in the state. We have 63,000 employees, and we generate about 80+ billion, maybe 90+ billion pre-COVID here. It's been an interesting time, very interesting time. I've been in aviation 40 years. I was a pilot for American during September 11th. I thought that was something that I would never see again in my life, and hopefully the terrorism hasn't, but we have a new terrorist, and that terrorist is COVID-19, and we're dealing with it. It's really difficult to fight an enemy, one, that you can't see, and two, that you've never seen before. So as a former military guy, invisible enemies are very, very difficult. But Hartsfield-Jackson is in a good place. Atlanta is a great city with great support for us here. And we've come to a place here with COVID-19 where the airport in January and February of 2020, we were looking at over almost 10 million passengers a month and probably around 113 million passengers prior. Hold on one more second. I'm going to try to see if I can get this camera to focus maybe a little better. Doesn't look like it. So we were looking at around 113 million. Our previous record in 2019 was 110 million passengers, and we had 900,000 flights a day here a year prior to the pandemic. And we were looking at a great year. We were building additional gates for more capacity. The airport was just humming along. Our revenues were going up. Corporate travel was going up. Business leaders were very excited about moving here due to our 150 domestic destinations and 75 international destinations. Just a great economic engine for the area. And I will tell you, on March 10th, we had 2,700 flights and 310,000 passengers in our terminal that day. And on April 4th, we were down to 450 flights and maybe 9,000 passengers. So we took a tremendous drop off. But the airport can't close, and we can't actually meet the size of the airport with the demand of the passengers at that time, because the airport has to stay open. We were flying doctors and nurses all over the world. We're using Atlanta Hartsfield. CDC is located here. There was quite a bit of travel going on for emergency response. PPE and our cargo operations are ramped up rather rapidly, but we put the effort in to keep the airport open. And I've been listening to the conversation about teleworking, and trying to keep an airport open, having your staff teleworking is just not going to happen. But we have, I have about 1,200 employees here, and we had about 200 of them being able to telework in our marketing and our public relations and our financial fields, where our police, fire, operations, security, customer service, and transportation people all had to be here through the pandemic. And the pandemic hit us pretty hard in the beginning because of the guidance on masks and not really understanding the virus. And but once the mask policy came out, we did very, very well. So people say, so what's going on here at Hartsfield-Jackson, and where are you, and where is travel? We're very fortunate that we're one of the major hubs, domestic hubs in the United States. The three airports that are doing rather well in recovery are, first of all, Hartsfield-Jackson, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Denver International, the three big hub, American, United, and Delta. It seems like point-to-point travel is gone for a little while. Southwest is coming back slowly but surely, but the hub traffic seems to be recovering faster, which is going to change the paradigm going forward in how customers travel because they don't like to stop anywhere. But COVID hit us very hard. We are not a tax-funded operation. We generate all our own money, and we without that, we do not get any help. We get occasionally some construction grants from the FAA for certain runway and taxiway infrastructure, but we generate all of our own money, and all of a sudden our revenues almost went to zero. Parking is one of our revenue legs. Concessions is another, and then we have our leases, and then we have the rentals on a lot of our property. And the two legs, the parking and the concessions, basically the bottom fell out. Without the passengers, you don't have the concessionaires. And we took appropriate actions to allow our concessionaires to not go bankrupt, and went to city council here in Atlanta. And we had a whole bunch of things in place, one being free rent payments for a year and extending their leases so they can amortize their capital investments. But we had 340 concessionaires here, and right in April, I think we were down to about 45. So tremendous amount of closures of the business. Parking revenue, we still have parking lots closed here at Hartsfield-Jackson, the ones you have to take buses on. But all of the other lots remained open, and we do have pretty good business in those lots right now. We've reduced our prices quite a bit. So the airport's self-sustaining. All of a sudden, there's no revenue, but we have a 5,000-acre campus, 5 runways, 7 million square feet of building that we want to keep as much operational as we can. 1, to support business, and 2, to support the cargo effort. And thank goodness the federal government supported us with the largest grant of any airport in the country, with $338 million in CARES money to support us. And in fiscal year, for the first part of this year, we used about 80 million of it. And this year we expect to use somewhere around 120 million of it. And what we've done with that is we've kept our business growing, and we've kept our business model here. So we maintain this economic engine. Many places, when your customers and your operation shrink, you try to raise costs, right? We're in a cost recovery kind of business here. And many airports are suffering with that lack of revenue without the support. So what we're doing with our dollars is we're keeping our business model intact. And there's a reason that Hartsfield-Jackson is the busiest airport in the world. And I will tell you today, based on what's happening in China and Beijing, I believe we still are the busiest airport in the world. But I don't think we're going to hit 100 million passengers. I think we'll more be like 42 million this year. But we are the busiest airport. And what we've done, the reason for that is we are exceptionally low cost here at Hartsfield-Jackson to operate. Airplanes make money in the air. They don't make money on the ground. We have no delays. We have this amazing, efficient airfield and airport. And it's very profitable here for airlines to be here. And many of our airline partners are back. Some of them are back at 100%. Our low-cost carriers, Spirit and Frontier, they're flying the schedules they were flying before. And Delta, American, and United are bringing planes back as we speak. Because right now, we went down to 450 flights in April. As of next week, I believe we'll have over 2,000 flights a day here. And we'll probably have, over the Thanksgiving holiday, almost 200,000 passengers in our terminal on Sunday. So we're coming back strong. Everybody says, what does the recovery look like? Is it a square root? Is it a V? Is it an L? And that recovery, we believe, is more like a Nike swoosh. So we had this steep drop off, and we're coming back very gently. Right now, we're about 3.2 million passengers in October, excuse me, in September, and we should be around 3.7 million in October. So why are passengers coming back? Well, we took a lot of effort to make the airport, and the airlines have done a tremendous job making air travel safe. We have 5 million masks here we give out. So if anybody in this audience here needs a mask, you can come to Hartsfield-Jackson. I have about 4.7 million free masks here left to give out to our passengers and employees. So please come on by, and we'll take care of you. But we have plexiglass on all of our ticket counters, our concessions, in our TSA queues. We have plexiglass. We have deep cleaning every day. We're wiping down escalator handrails, seating. We have signs in our seats to space everybody out. But we are doing everything we can. We're fogging our trains every night with chemicals that last through the night and the next day to keep everybody safe. We are stressing that everybody walks between terminals. Get a little exercise while you're here. Being on a train is a little confining. It's a little hard to social distance, but come on, let's go for a little walk if you're going to fly. A lot of people are starting to come back and fly. There's a lot of pent up demand. People want to see families. I know the CDC is recommending against travel this holiday season. I would like to travel and I'd like it to be safe. And here at the airport, we're doing everything we can to keep it safe between social distancing, markings, and this extensive cleaning. We also have PA announcements, and people end up, we've been in this so long that sometimes people forget. We're reminding them about social distancing. Masks are required here in the airport, and masks are required on your flight. Secondly, our airline partners are fogging their planes between flights. They're fogging the jet bridges. They've done remarkable things to keep the airport safe. Harvard and the airlines have done many studies on the air and the airplane, and it seems to be very safe. I flew for 5 years during the SARS pandemic, and it was a very good experience. People were very, very safe. Our partner at Delta announced yesterday, our major partner, they have about 78% of the traffic here. They're going to keep the middle seat vacant all the way through March of 2021. That's great news if that's one of your concerns. But we're doing everything we can to make that passenger travel safe from the minute he gets on the airport property to the minute they leave the airport property in their destination. The community of airport CEOs around the country, we're working together to try to get a common picture, a common safety level so the passenger has a consistent experience throughout their travels. The federal government has not set that up yet. Even though they've given us money to do it, to put all these mitigations in place, there's not a standard policy across the nation. And then we got to talk about international travel. Hartsfield-Jackson had approximately 300 to 400 flights a day of international travel. That number right now is sitting at about 60. International travel is very difficult, and traveling between states can be very difficult without proper testing. You're going to see some innovation coming forward called air bridges, where you're going to get a test before you get on a plane. When you get to your destination, whether it be international or domestic, Hawaii is doing it now, where you'll go overseas and you'll get a test in an airport overseas, and then you won't have to quarantine, and then you'll know everybody on the plane at least tested negative 15 minutes before departure. So these innovations are coming fast and furious. And obviously our biggest hope is the vaccine to get us all inoculated and to get us all back to normal. I don't think you're going to see too many changes in the terminal operation. And when I say that, from a structural perspective, the infrastructure, we're probably going to keep the infrastructure pretty much the same. If anything, we are going to make the infrastructure touchless. There's a couple choke points when you come to the airport. The first choke point is if you have to check a bag or go to the ticket counter. We have kiosks now where you can check in. We're working very diligently with our airline partners to put touchless, biometric baggage check. So in other words, you'll come into the terminal. If you don't have to go to the ticket counter, you just have a bag to check. You'll put your driver's license down or scan it over a reader. It will look at your face, it'll match it, it will know it's you, your baggage ticket will come out, you'll put it on your bag and you'll put it in the belt. The next place you'll go is the TSA. The TSA is implementing a similar biometric reader at their at the TDCs, they're called, which is where they check your boarding pass. You'll be able not to touch anything there. It'll read your face and you'll walk through the TSA. And the next point, obviously, is the train, which I've already talked about. We're hoping you'll take the walk down the concourse here and look at all of our artwork. And then when you get to the plane, facial recognition is already here at Hartsfield-Jackson in our international terminal. You won't need to show your boarding pass. You'll just be able to walk on the plane. Well, they're working on a much more predictive boarding process process, and we'll see where that ends up. But hopefully our goal is to make it a touchless, frictionless, reliable, consistent process. And the TSA is working diligently on different scanning technologies. As a matter of fact, yesterday we opened 5 more lanes, and we got 4 more to go here on our south checkpoint, where we have CT scan machines that are highly efficient and highly fast and have much less of a false positive rate. So your process through our TSA checkpoints even going to be faster going forward, which is all good news. So there's been a couple silver linings here in the pandemic. The first one is with less traffic and passengers, we've accelerated our capital plan. We are speeding up numerous programs because we don't have to close the airport. We can close the airport earlier in the day and keep the construction closer a little later in the morning, instead of just closing for a 4 or 5 hour window from midnight to 4 or 5 a.m. We're now allowing our contractors to work longer due to the reduced traffic and passengers. So our projects are speeding up, and at Hartsfield-Jackson, unlike many capital programs around the country, we're at 100%. We're full speed ahead, and we're growing. We're building 5 gates. We're building efficiency in our airfield, and we're making our plane train 25% faster by building a turnaround. We're replacing the inside of the terminal tiles. We have a whole slew. We basically have about $1 billion worth of capital work going on. The other silver lining of the virus has been prior to COVID, we had a very difficult time hiring people. In Atlanta, the prices of electricians and skilled workforce were very high, and we were unable to compete. And to try to get an electrician, COVID has brought that down, and we have filled numerous of our vacancies here. So Hartsfield-Jackson actually has hired 50 more people during the pandemic than we had prior to the pandemic. So we have a lot of good things going on here. And in closing, I want to say that COVID has wreaked havoc on our industry and on our business. It's not only just us, it's conventions, it's hotels, it's families, it's how do I visit my mother-in-law in New York. I have to quarantine to go see her. But it's very difficult, and we look so forward to the recovery of this vaccine. But I want you to know that air travel is safe. I think there's been about 1.4 billion people have flown since the start of the pandemic, and the numbers are very, very low for attributable to air travel. Those numbers mostly happened in the beginning due to no mask requirement. But we are flexible. We have done what we can, and we are going to continue to install the latest and greatest technologies going forward here at Hartsfield-Jackson and in the air traffic system of the United States. All of my colleagues are doing things that we never dreamed of doing. And who would have thought that you're looking at 110 million passengers, 115 maybe, and you may end up the year at 40 million passengers due to this pandemic. It's just a remarkable drop in our business, and the flexibility and the dedication of my staff. I have 800 mission critical people that are making this economic engine come back to life, and they're doing a hell of a job. So Abby, thank you for the opportunity to talk to everybody, and I hope to see you soon here at Hartsfield-Jackson.
Thank you so much, John. I thank you so much for your words. And I think it is very true that in crisis, it breeds innovation. And we see how much your airport and the airline industry in general is innovating to make sure that safety is of the utmost importance. And so thank you very much for your closing remarks. It was wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Abby.
Well, thank you again, everyone, for being here today. Thank you for our audience, for our registered guests, for our sponsors, to FIS, to Jamestown, to Peachtree Planning, to Clayton County, University of West Georgia. Thank you so much for making this day's event possible. To all of our panelists, to all of our moderators, to everyone out there in the audience, thank you very, very much for being here today. Our next event will be the launch of Invest Miami. That will be on December 3rd. I hope you can join us at that time. And that will be the last one for this year, at least. And then we'll be starting fresh and new in 2021. We will also be starting Focus Atlanta 2021 in the early months of next year. And we do hope that the vaccine takes hold and we will be able to host meetings in person again. However, the show must continue, and we will continue our meetings virtually until it is safe to do so otherwise. A reminder that all the registered guests to this webinar will be receiving complimentary access to read Focus Atlanta. And this is the report that we've been talking about. So it's quite a hefty book indeed, and close to 200 pages in length, when you can hear all of the local leaders' opinions on how the pandemic has affected the Atlanta market and what are their plans to combat the continuing pandemic moving forward in the pages of our book. So please do contact us if you would like a physical copy of the report as well. But again, it is my pleasure to have you all here today. This webinar will continue to be available on YouTube. So if you missed it, you can tune in another time. Thank you everyone for attending today.